Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I guess it's a bit of a late morning, but welcome to the Atlantic Council on International Relations webinar on Taiwan, U.S. relations. It's also a pleasure to welcome members of the Atlanta Diplomatic Corps, as well as the many VIPs that are joining us today. Because of the list is long and our time is short, please forgive me for not mentioning each and every one of your names. However, be assured we are delighted that you are able to join us today. I might add we are using GoToWebinar for the first time, and we may experience some technical difficulties as we move along this road. Please bear with us. Today it is our special pleasure to welcome our speaker, His Excellency Joseph Wu, Foreign Minister of the Republic of China. Mr. Wu, as many of you know, had planned to come to Atlanta in March. However, COVID-19 prevented that visit. So I would like to thank Director General Wang of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office here in Atlanta, and his deputy, Tony Tai, as well as our previous Director General, Vincent Liu, for making this talk possible. I should note that Taiwan is 12 hours ahead of us. We are awake while Mr. Wu is asleep. Well, probably not right now. He's probably reading the last reports that he received from the minister before retiring for the evening. So as we have advertised, his talk was pre-recorded a couple of days ago, after which he answered a few questions. Today, Director General Elliot Wang will answer your questions on Minister Wu's behalf. As many of you know, the Republic of China was established in 1912 and was displaced to the island of Taiwan in 1949 when the communists came to power. In contrast to the mainland China today, Taiwan is a vibrant democracy. It is also a highly successful and dynamic market economy. However, geography is not its friend. Taiwan lies uncomfortably close to mainland China. Kinmen Island, known by many of the older generations as Quemoy, lies 2 kilometers from the mainland. When I visited Kinmen some years ago, you could see the mainland, no question about it. For those of you who have followed the growing authoritarianism on the mainland, the PRC's violation of the international agreement with the British on Hong Kong, its increasingly aggressive behavior in the region, and the threats often made to Taiwan, you may have a feeling about how uncomfortable the people of Taiwan are about their vulnerability and how important their relationship is with the United States. While you have had an opportunity to read Mr. Wu's biographical sketch, I would like to highlight some of his background. Minister Wu is no stranger to the United States. A graduate of Taiwan's premier university, the National Chengchi University, Mr. Wu went on to receive a master's and a doctoral degree in political science from the University of Missouri and Ohio State, respectively. He told me that those years he spent in the United States were among his most enjoyable time of his life. Dr. Wu joined the Foreign Service in 2018. However, he has held several senior positions in government over the past decades, including Secretary General to the President and of the National Security Council, and Minister and Chairman of the Mainland Affairs Council, the body charged with coordinating relations with the People's Republic of China. He also served as Chief Representative to the United States. We are absolutely delighted to have the Foreign Minister speak to us today. Thank you.
members of the Atlanta Council on International Relations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Earlier this year, when I learned that I was able to visit Atlanta again in March, I was really looking forward to it. So you can imagine my disappointment when the visit had to be canceled due to the pandemic. Although I cannot meet you in person, I'm happy to have this opportunity to meet you online and speak about the important partnership between Taiwan and the United States and recent progress in bilateral relations. Some of you might have already heard about the major announcement our government recently made about U.S. beef and pork imports. We believe that this key step will be an important starting point for closer economic partnership between Taiwan and the U.S. Taiwan plays an important role in the global economy and has incredibly close trade and investment ties with the U.S. The U.S. is Taiwan's second largest trading partner, our second largest export market, and our third largest source of imports. Meanwhile, with a population of just 23 million, we are the U.S. 10th largest trading partner. Our total trade in 2019 stood at 87 billion US dollars. And even these numbers give only a superficial impression of just how intimately linked our economies actually are. Taiwan and US businesses have long worked closely together as trustworthy and reliable partners. For the past 3 years, Taiwan has organized one of the largest foreign business delegations to the Select USA Investment Summit in Washington, D.C. We also send biannual agricultural trade goodwill missions to the U.S. to procure several billion-dollar worth of America's best agricultural produce. Taiwan is the seventh largest export market for U.S. agricultural products, the second largest on a per capita basis. I would also like to especially point out that Georgia pecans contributed a large portion of this. You can find Georgia pecans in almost every local supermarket in Taiwan. From an investment standpoint, more and more Taiwanese companies are investing and creating jobs in the US. Most recently, TSMC, the world's leading semiconductor company, announced plans to build a $12 billion US chip plant in Arizona. Taiwan's open, rules-based business environment sets us apart from certain other countries and ties us closely with the US. Since surfacing in Wuhan, China, late last year, COVID-19 has spread to all corners of the globe. The disease has brought the global economy to a standstill and changed our daily lives almost forever. However, I'm proud to say that the pandemic is under control in Taiwan. Thanks to our vigilance regarding pandemic in China and the effort our frontline healthcare personnel, today we can say that things are very much business as usual in Taiwan. People are going to work, students are going to school, and public venues remain lively and bustling at weekends. Taiwan's advanced medical and healthcare system is widely admired around the world. But our success in combating COVID-19 has not been limited to scientific or medical achievement alone. In fact, what lies at the heart of Taiwan's successful response to COVID-19 has been the Taiwan model and the open, democratic, and free nature of our society. As Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, during tough times, real friends stick together. Since April, Taiwan has donated more than 12 million medical masks to the U.S., including 110,000 to the great state of Georgia. Secretary Pompeo's affirmation of the Taiwan model as a paradigm of openness and generosity has only reinforced our determination to remain faithful to the values of our free and open society. In another open acknowledgement of our contributions, last month, Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar visited Taiwan. He met with President Tsai Ing-wen, myself, and other senior officials and experts to exchange views on the Taiwan model. We also discussed future cooperation on the development and production of vaccines and drugs. Secretary Azar explicitly said that this pandemic has pushed the United States to recognize the strategic importance of the manufacturing sector. Taiwan, with its strengths in the pharmaceutical sector, is ready and willing to be a secure and reliable supplier to the US, especially in the face of the COVID-19 outbreak. In addressing the economic challenges posed by the pandemic, our government unveiled a number of stimulus measures very early on. These were designed to get our businesses back on track and ensure that the Taiwanese industry can track shifts in global supply chains. At the same time, our government has implemented dynamic economic reforms. We are transforming Taiwan into Asia's high-end manufacturing and R&D hub, a regional financial and wealth management center, and a base for high-quality talent within the Indo-Pacific region. Overall, we have been working to improve Taiwan's regulatory environment across the board. In turn, Taiwan's economy is becoming more resilient and responsive. We have made ourselves an attractive target for any country seeking a fair and equitable trade agreement. Indeed, conditions are now ripe for a bilateral trade agreement between Taiwan and the US. For years, some US friends have said that one of the major roadblocks impeding the progress of a bilateral trade agreement has been our regulatory barriers on US beef and pork. So in a demonstration of our earnest commitment, on August 28th, our government announced our intention to break these barriers. The reaction from the US side has been overwhelmingly positive. Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue, and congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle have all responded approvingly. And as President Tai has said, our move will be an important starting point for more comprehensive Taiwan-US economic cooperation. We sincerely hope these will open doors and pave the way for substantive talks on closer trade ties, including a BTA. To reiterate, Taiwan's relaxation of restrictions on US beef and pork imports is a significant step. It demonstrates Taiwan's commitment to addressing outstanding issues and moving toward a BTA. It will be significant not only from an economic standpoint, but also strategically, setting an example for like-minded countries throughout the region. Our commitment has been noted, and the US has followed through. Assistant Secretary of State David Stilwell announced at a Heritage Foundation webinar that Taiwan and the US will launch an economic and commercial dialogue led by Keith Craig, the Department of State's Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment. We look forward to this new high-level dialogue and believe that it will solidify the mutually beneficial economic ties between Taiwan and the US. 2020 has been a year of challenges. The US-China trade dispute and the COVID-19 pandemic have changed the global economic order and accelerated the restructuring of global supply chains. It is a great time to strengthen the Taiwan-US economic partnership. As mentioned, talks on a BTA will be an excellent starting point. So we urge all relevant stakeholders to support a closer Taiwan-US trade partnership. And we hope that the US, our strongest strategic partner and world's economic leader, recognize the broader strategic implications such an agreement would undoubtedly have. Taiwan's democracy is precious and unique. It needs your continued support. I can assure you, you'll find in us an unwavering partner and a committed friend capable of contributing to the prosperity of both our countries and the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you for your kind attention. I look forward to exchanging views with you all shortly.
Minister Wu,
Yes.
Americans have been greatly concerned about what has been taking place in Hong Kong recently. Have the new security laws imposed on Hong Kong violated the agreement that was set between the PRC and Hong Kong and the British at the that ended in 1997, as well as spell the death nail to the PRC's constitutional principle of one country, two systems? what concerns do you have over the rising authoritarianism in the PRC, reflected in part by these new security laws in Hong Kong?
Thank you very much for this outstanding question. This is something not only Taiwan is watching, I think the international community overall has been watching as well. What happened of the imposition of the national security law is really a tragedy for our history. We saw Hong Kong was a free society. Freedom of press, freedom of speech was being the symbol of this place. But after the imposition of the national security law, we saw things are taking effect right now. For example, the Chinese government or the Hong Kong authorities started attacking Apple Daily, which is the last symbol of press freedom in China, in Hong Kong. And they are also arresting pro-democracy activists. They are disqualifying candidates who are suitable for the coming elections. They are delaying the election. In what that is to steal the election away from the people in Hong Kong. So it's really tragic to see what's going on in Hong Kong. But if we look broader in the Chinese periphery, what's happening in Hong Kong is not an isolated incident. China has been doing that to Tibet for decades. And beginning from 3-4 years ago, China was doing that to Xinjiang. And most recently, they were also doing it to Mongolia. And what's happening to Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, is still an unknown, but there are being press reports about what's going on in Mongolia already. The Chinese authorities banned school children from learning their own languages. So what's happening in China is that the Chinese government is waging an ideological warfare against humanity. If we look even broader, the Chinese government has set up its Confucius Institute worldwide just to propagate the Chinese philosophy or Chinese ideology. So this is something that we need to look at very closely, whether we need to continue to tolerate what China has been doing to Hong Kong, to Xinjiang, to Mongolia, or to other countries, or we need to unite together to think about the best way to deal with the expansionism of the Chinese ideology. So this is what I see. And Taiwan happens to be on the front line of this Chinese ideological warfare against the rest of the world. The Chinese infiltration into the Taiwanese society, or the Chinese influence operations into Taiwan, or its military intimidations against Taiwan has been something that we have been going through. And luckily, we have a very strong support from the United States in dealing with all this situation. And I certainly hope that the support for Taiwan will continue so that Taiwan does not fall into the hands of the communists in China.
Thank you so much for that answer to the question. I think that really helps a great deal in our understanding of what is really going on in that region of the world. I'd like to turn the microphone now over to Tony Kazukli. Tony, I think you have a couple of questions.
I do indeed. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Welcome, Minister Wu. Thank you so much for the time you're giving us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's our pleasure, sir.
Mm-hmm.
As COVID-19 opened up the possibility of a free trade agreement between the United States and Taiwan, and if not, what are the impediments to be overcome?
This is another very good question. COVID-19 has taken a toll in the international economy. It's affecting so many countries at this moment, and some of our lifestyle has been affected almost permanently. But luckily, Taiwan has been rather successful in dealing with COVID-19. And throughout this period of time, Taiwan is not only successful in dealing with the pandemic, Taiwan is also trying to provide contributions or support to other countries to fight against the spread of the disease. So far, we have contributed more than 51 million face masks alone to other countries to deal with the situation. And we also provided relief material or supplies to the United States in support of the medical personnel on the front line. So to people in the United States or to other countries, Taiwan has been found as a very reliable partner, not only in dealing with the pandemic, but also in working together in dealing with the international issues. And therefore, for a FTA between Taiwan and the United States, this is a high time. You know, look at the economic situation around the world right now. We need the like-minded partners to work closer with each other. And if you look at East Asia, there is no partner better than Taiwan, more reliable than Taiwan. And Taiwan's ready to work with the United States for an FTA. As in my speech indicated, the U.S.-Taiwan economic relations have been benefiting both sides. Our investment and trade relations with the United States help support around 350,000 job opportunities in the United States. And if there's going to be an FTA between Taiwan and the United States, I'm sure it's going to bring more investment from Taiwan into the United States and more trade opportunities between the two countries. And of course, it's going to be beneficial to the United States. Of course, if we look broader in a strategic perspective, we are fighting a war on ideology. We are fighting against the expansionism of the communist China. And what can be a better way to support Taiwan than an FTA between Taiwan and the United States? So we are longing for that opportunity to start negotiating with the United States for an FTA. The trade negotiator in the United States has long been criticizing Taiwan for setting up barriers against American agricultural imports to Taiwan. More specifically, is the barriers on pork and beef. But earlier last month, the president of Taiwan has already publicly announced that we are going to alleviate the barriers of those agricultural products from coming into Taiwan. And we certainly hope that the U.S. trade negotiators can look at this as a serious gesture of Taiwan's side that is ready to negotiate with the United States for a trade agreement. And I would like to emphasize again that an FTA between Taiwan and the United States is going to benefit Taiwan, of course, but it's going to benefit the United States economically as well. But more important is that it's strategically important for Taiwan and the United States to be closer to each other on the economic front so that we can ward off the Chinese way of using economy as a tool to fight against Taiwan. So I would argue that it's high time for Taiwan and the United States to start negotiating with each other for an FTA. The United States is going to have more relations with the like-minded partners in this part of the world. And an FTA, a model FTA between Taiwan and the United States is going to be a very example for the United States to bring the negotiations to other countries. So in short, it's going to be economically important for the United States, and it's going to be strategically important for the United States as well.
Minister Wu, that leaves another important question to be addressed. In recent weeks, you've spoken of China giving outward signs that it may be preparing for an invasion of Taiwan. With Hong Kong's reversal of fortunes in recent months, global condemnation, do you really believe it's conceivable that the PRC would risk worldwide condemnation, major trade disruptions at home, and/or a possible confrontation with the United States in order to conquer Taiwan?
Well, this is a question that people in Taiwan has been dwelling. And I'm sure the decision makers in the United States will be thinking about as well. When we look at the situation in Hong Kong, the Chinese government imposed the national security law on Hong Kong. But what we have seen internationally is that there's international condemnation against the Chinese government, all right. But when it comes to the concrete actions of sanctions against China, I only see the United States is taking concrete measures. So the actions by the international community doesn't seem enough. And for the people in Taiwan, we worry that if the Chinese actions in Hong Kong is not stopped, if the Chinese actions in Xinjiang and in Inner Mongolia is not stopped, then we are concerned that the Chinese might take Taiwan as its logical next step. And of course, Taiwan is trying to prepare for possible scenarios. We have trained our military for our own defense, and thanks to the United States, we have been buying more advanced weapons from the United States for our self-defense. We certainly hope that the international community can come to Taiwan's aid if the Chinese government is initiating a military attack against Taiwan. But I certainly hope that the Chinese government wouldn't do that. But if you look at the Chinese military actions in the last few months, I would say that the Chinese seem to be trying to get itself ready for a possible attack against Taiwan. On August 8th, August 10th, when Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, was here in Taiwan about to meet with our president, the Chinese sent its jet fighters across the medium line of the Taiwan Strait to show to the Taiwanese people that they are capable of attacking against Taiwan. Of course, this is just one of those incidents that we saw the Chinese were taking very provocative actions against Taiwan. Very recently, Chinese also sent its military airplanes across the medium line of the Taiwan Strait to show to the Taiwanese people that is willing to take provocative actions. So this is, to us, it's very dangerous acts on the part of China. The reason why I mentioned about the medium line of the Taiwan Strait is that that medium line has been safeguarding peace and stability and the status quo across the Taiwan Strait. But the Chinese government continues to break that status quo, and it's very dangerous. So what we are asking for is that the international community to look more closely at the Chinese provocative actions against Taiwan. And we don't want the Chinese to take any war against Taiwan, because it's going to mean disaster, not only for Taiwan, but also for other countries in the region. And as I said a little bit earlier, when China is trying to expand outward to fight against freedom and democracy, and to expand its own ideology, to impose its authoritarian international order on the rest of the world, Taiwan happens to be on the front line. And we know our status. And therefore, we try to safeguard ourselves. And we also deeply understand that we have a responsibility to safeguard the freedom and democracy and democratic way of life for the rest of the world. We are determined to fight this war. We are determined to defend ourselves, even though many countries may see Taiwan as a small country, as opposed to a giant country, China. But we believe that democracy is going to prevail, just as the proverb said, David versus Goliath. Taiwan, the democratic Taiwan as a David, is going to prevail over the long struggle with Goliath, the authoritarian China, because we believe that democracy will prevail, and therefore Taiwan will prevail.
Minister Wu, again, thank you for the time you've given us. Please don't forget the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia. They're looking forward to increased trade with Taiwan. I wish you and your family continued good health and the people of Taiwan continued independence. Dr. Kennedy.
Again, thanks from the entire Atlanta Council on International Relations team for joining us. And thank you for a very thoughtful and comprehensive and candid responses to our questions. As Tony has said, and I reiterate, we wish you, Taiwan, and the people of Taiwan the very, very best in the future. Again, thank you, Minister Wu, and good luck.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me again. And I wish all of you well as well. Thank you.
Well, ACIR members and guests, we apologize for any difficulties you're having with this GoTo webinar. We've had a number of technical problems associated with it. It is now my pleasure to introduce the new Director General of Taipei Economic and Cultural Office here in Atlanta, Elliot Wang. Like Minister Wu, Mr. Wang is no stranger to the United States. He has studied at Harvard University and was stationed in Washington, D.C. He holds degrees from the Tung Hai University and the National Chung Chi University. In addition to his studies at Harvard, he has completed programs at Oxford University and Taiwan's National Academy of Civil Service. He began his diplomatic career in serving in Washington, D.C. He has served abroad in Brussels, Belgium. I might add, among his hobbies are wine tasting, listening to violin music, golfing, and trying all kinds of delicious foods from around the world. Mr. Wang, welcome to Atlanta. It is a great pleasure to have you join us. It's a great pleasure to have you here in Atlanta. Dr. Wang will now take questions from our audience, and our Director of Programs, Tony Kazukali, will relay those to our audience. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Good morning, Director General Wang. Thank you for the time that you are giving to the ACIR membership and its guests. We'll start out with a question that has three parts to it. What are Taiwan's principal imports from and exports to Georgia and the Southeast? What is the nature of Georgia's investments in Georgia and in the Southeast? And what Georgia companies are the major investors in Taiwan?
Okay. First of all, I'm very honored to take this opportunity to meet people online, and also thanks for the ACIR giving me this opportunity to answer a question from our audience. Okay. So basically, I would say that Taiwanese companies' structure is quite similar to those in Georgia in recent years, which are the fintech or bioscience, technology, okay, and so on. So basically, we had some manufacturing companies investing in Georgia over the years, but in recent years, there are more and more Taiwanese companies from above mentioned industry coming into Georgia for more investment here. And of course, the agricultural products produced by Georgia State is also a big favor for Taiwanese people. So we import a lot of Georgian agricultural products.
Magazine.
Yeah. Okay, I can hear it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you? Yes. Our next question is from Global Atlanta Magazine. One of the most influential magazines throughout the Georgia region, as well as the American Southeast. Minister Wu spoke about the strategic importance of an FTA and Taiwan's role in restructured global supply chains. But Taiwanese companies are still heavily intertwined with China. How do you make the case to be a trusted source for manufactured goods and an FTA partner with the US when its interdependence remains so strong?
Okay. Recently, we have been hearing a lot of conversations and talks about the US is going is trying to decouple with China in terms of this supply chain. Okay, and I think Taiwan can play a very big role on this front to help the U.S. companies, because Taiwanese companies supplies the most of the intermediate products for the U.S. ICT industry, and these intermediate products, 80% of them are produced by the Taiwanese company in mainland China. So what I'm trying to say is that when U.S. is trying to decouple with China, it means that the U.S. needs to decrease the dependence on Chinese market. At the same time, so does Taiwanese company. So that's why we need this BTA to help the Taiwanese company to find another bigger market instead of a Chinese one, to decrease both the Taiwanese and the U.S. companies' dependence on the Chinese markets. And by doing so, we can remove a lot of investment in the mainland China toward Taiwan or into the U.S. markets. Okay, and by doing so, the U.S. can also demonstrate its determination for the free and dynamic economic development, for showing this model for the countries in Asia Pacific area. This will be also the part of its the Asia Pacific strategy for the United States. And in the bigger picture, this will also provide big opportunities for making the global supply chain change to come to realize this kind of strategy.
The next question comes from a reporter, Joan Wong, of the Epoch Times. Technically, both the mainland and Taiwan remain in a state of war. In spite of mainland escalating bellicosity in late 2020, what does your government see as the mainland's greatest weakness? Did you hear this?
Can you repeat again the question?
Yes. Technically, both the mainland China and Taiwan remain in a state of war. In spite of mainland escalating bellicosity in late 2020, what does your government see as the mainland's greatest weakness?
Well, I would say the ideology is their biggest weakness, because people can see, can realize that, well, actually, people didn't expect in this so-called 21st century, and the century for everyone is so focusing on gaining, maintaining their freedom, democracy. In this kind of era, we still can see the Chinese trying to dominate the ideology and try to promote the autocracy globally. So this is something really beyond people's imagination. So I would say that people are watching, okay, are watching something that happened in that part of the world, in East Asia. So I do believe people understand clearly that their best choice for the ideology is definitely not the Chinese style.
Tony, if you will excuse me a moment, I just want to remind the audience to put your questions in the question box, and we will get those to the Director General. Thank you.
General Wang, the recent sale of F-16Vs to Taiwan illustrates America's commitment to a free Taiwan. What steps is Taiwan taking to strengthen itself beyond the purchase of American fighter aircraft, such as the F-16V?
Well, basically, our government is determined to increase our military budget in the coming years. That's one. And secondly, we are developing the so-called asymmetrical strategy, which means that we can use the least amount of the best quality the military to be against the Chinese Communist invasion.
I believe what probably stimulated that question, General Wang, was a Foreign Policy magazine article recently that charged that there might be an over-reliance upon American sophisticated weaponry, and that Taiwan might be having some problems with its reserve units and young Taiwanese enlisting. That seems to be a scurrilous charge, and I suspect this particular questioner would like you to clarify and defend your government's position. Do you have one with regard to that article? I'm not sure that you're familiar with it, but it was just recently out there for all of us to read.
Well, you're right. I'm not quite familiar with this topic, but I'm trying to give you some thoughts about that comment. Well, basically, the U.S. government is always determined to implement its obligation in the so-called Taiwan Relations Act. Okay. So U.S. has been the strongest supporter and the supplier for the weapons to Taiwan. So that's naturally we become the biggest, well, one of the biggest market for the U.S. Weapons export.
What do you see as a major foreign policy challenge that, if not the foreign major policy challenge, one or more, that the Republic of China will have to confront in the near future?
I think the biggest challenges in this regard would be the international participation, and also the numbers of the countries recognizing Taiwan. So that's why we have been working closely with the U.S. and other like-minded countries like Japan, European Union, Australia, try to find out another entry for this purpose, especially the participations of the international organizations. I would give everyone one example. In 2015, the U.S. and Taiwan, both sides established the so-called GCTF framework. Okay, it stands for the Global Cooperation and Training Framework. This framework basically is trying to use the U.S. networking globally and combine Taiwan's successful experience on development in terms of technology or the energy, and also the medical development, and also something like gender equality. So both countries tries to use this platform to share Taiwan's development experience over the years to other countries in Southeast Asia, or in the South Pacific Islands, or even in the Caribbean areas. So this is something we are trying to trying to have Taiwan participate more international activities in light of we are not accepted by the UN system so far.
I see. The relations between mainland China and Taiwan are strained due to military threats. We have someone who wishes to ask you, how does your government explain the thriving economic relationship that you have with mainland China and the threats and the concerns that you have, and of course the threats coming from mainland? There seem to be a juxtaposition. You have a close economic relationship in terms of trade, and yet they threaten and you vow to defend. How do you explain that?
Well, it's quite logical because Taiwan is a democratic country. The government cannot order the civilians or the business companies not to go to invest in this country or that area. I think this is the same thing happening to the US government. But in recent years, these companies in mainland China gradually realized that investing in mainland China has no more advantage for them anymore. So right now they are seeking other destination to remove their supply chain to those destinations. So I think this is the right time, as I mentioned earlier, this is the right time for having a global supply chain reconfiguration. So I think this is the right time for Taiwanese company to remove their investment from mainland China back to Taiwan or into the US market. So it's the right time for US and Taiwan working together to have a PTA to facilitate this process.
This is an interesting question for you. Is there a difference between the younger Taiwanese and the older Taiwanese regarding their attitudes towards mainland China? Do you discern any difference?
Well, according to those public polls recent years, it did show that there's some difference between the different generations toward the Chinese. I would say that the numbers pro the status quo is more and more, okay, and the numbers recognizing themselves as the Taiwanese is more and more in recent years. I would say that this is only the result of the Chinese provocation and the bullying over Taiwan over the past years. So I think the Chinese government needs to be responsible for this outcome.
Taiwan remains a laboratory for freedom, and this has allowed it to harness the new technologies for the improvement of mankind. In your judgment, how does the Communist Chinese Party use this same technology to suppress and control its own citizens?
Well, obviously, we can see from the reports that the Chinese government tries to use the AI technology to to collect all citizens' information into the one system to easily control them, to follow them, to locate them whenever they need. If they want to arrest people, they want to suppress people, they can easily use this high tech to make it happen.
I see. General Wang, is there an argument that can be made that Taiwan's democratic system is more feared by the Chinese Communist Party than all of the weapons of war that Taiwan might be able to use to defend itself? These are somewhat philosophical questions. I assume you can take this one and tell us why they may fear that word and that principle more than all of the arms that you have on the island of Taiwan. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think in terms of the size of land, in terms of the population and the military strength, I don't think any country would like to have a war with China, because a war always causes a lot of damage and the deaths of people. So we are not that stupid trying to pick up a war with China. So we like to transform China, to change China in a smarter way and in a very peaceful way. So that's why the democracy is the strongest power, because it caused no casualty. Okay, it caused no war. So that's why the Chinese communists is so afraid of being democratic as Taiwan does, because the Chinese government is the one-party government. Okay, the power it look.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not catching your audio at this point. Director General Wang, could not hear your last question. I hope you can hear me and that the technical issues are being dealt with on both sides of our microphones. I could not hear your last answer. Nevertheless, if you can hear me, would you just signal that you can? Can you hear me? Would you raise your hand so I know that you can hear me? I cannot.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We have time for one last question, perhaps the hardest one of all. I don't know, but I know you're up to it. And this is for you. Regretfully, we have some younger Americans who take their freedom and liberty for granted without thought to its possible loss. You and your fellow citizens face that possibility every day. Share with these Americans what the words freedom and liberty mean to you. And we have maybe a minute, 2 minutes at most.
Well, I have a short answer for your question. I think the best idea for the U.S. The young generation to understand the value of freedom is that to send them to Taiwan to observe by themselves how precious the freedom and the democracy can be. So that's why my government in recent years have been establishing a lot of bilateral youth exchanges program. So that's my short answer for you. We hope we can see more young generations exchange between our two sides. Then the young generation in the US can cherish more about about what they have right now. So I would like to also end my my QA session by saying thank you again for the SAIR for organizing this session to make this possible. And I would also like to invite all the audience to check our official website and also our Twitter and Facebook in the future, because my office will always publish, put some update information about Taiwan, about the U.S.-Taiwan relations on daily basis on our website and the Twitter and the Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, General Wong. Thank you for your time, for Foreign Minister Wu giving us his time as well. We wish you successive independence for you and your people throughout. Dr. Kennedy?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I certainly regret any technical difficulties that you've had today with using Go to webinar. We hope we will be able to resolve those if we use this platform again in the future. Director General Wong, I thank you very much for your commentary on the weakness of the People's Republic of China and its ideology. It reminds me of comments that were made by George Kennan many, many years ago when we were confronting the early days of the Cold War and the requirement to remain true to the values of our democratic processes and the strengths of our market economy and the strength of governments that are formed and conceived of for and by the people. I always have to chuckle a bit when I see a government that is clearly authoritarian titled People's Republic. As a matter of fact, the true People's Republic are those that are governed democratically. Minister Wu, if you are watching this at midnight your time, again, thanks so much for your remarks. Mr. Wong, thank you very much for your valuable insights during the Q&A. On behalf of all the members and guests of ACIR, thank you both for your very thoughtful comments and frank commentary. It has indeed been a pleasure to have you join us today. We wish you, Taiwan, and the people of Taiwan the very, very best in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We wish you good health and great happiness. Wear your masks and social distance when appropriate. From Atlanta and ACIR, good afternoon.